This is the last question, question 4. What if we are undermining emotional development? Because if we follow the argument set out in question 3, and we can see there are unmet emotional needs creating too much alarm, frustration, or separation, then we are not going to get at the emotional maturity we need from this child. If we can be convinced by the arguments in question 2 that focusing too much on a child's behavior and expecting the child to make changes is like demanding good test results before we've discovered what this child needs to learn, then we can look beyond behavior with a relational developmental lens. In fact, if we believe that behavior is the problem, we won't be able to see the underlying issues with emotional needs. So, in this way, the behavior learning paradigm exists in stark contrast to a relational developmental model. Because selfhood cannot be taught or forced, it can only be nurtured, cultivated, and protected. Development is about readiness. So, question 1 lays out our best basic plan, which is to work on attachment so we can maximize feelings of belonging. And we will get a child or youth who wants to work with us. They will trust us to lead them, organize their feelings, and teach them. The problem with pushing for more independence from this student or attempting to control, manage, and change their behavior is captured by using the metaphor human development is like a river. The river is flowing as quickly and efficiently as it can, considering the impediments and terrain it encounters. The water moves continuously on its own, but additionally, the rate of water flow can change with the seasons, just as human development is uneven. Pushing a river is futile, and forcing the river to change direction can have very unpredictable outcomes. Our most fruitful action will be to understand the terrain and remove the most problematic impediments. Like a river, human development takes a natural course of its own. So if we can be vigilant with enhancing the attachment relationship as we identify the terrain creating unmet emotional needs and clear the path for healthy development, then the 4 processes of emotional development can take their course. In this way, emotional development or emotional maturation is just as much about what we adults protect and nurture as it is about what we cannot control about the flow of the river. It would be wonderful if teachers could have conversations about emotional development as it relies on the 4 ongoing processes: attachment, adaptation, emergence, and integration. Indigenous wisdom already contains a good understanding of these 4 processes, so the Circle of Courage can help us immensely by identifying the emotional outcomes found in the emotionally mature. Attachment creates belonging, according to the Circle of Courage. Adaptation results in mastery of our environment. Emergence becomes independence, and integration creates generosity. Opportunities for attachment, adaptation, emergence, and integration are provided by everyday life. And the best scenario for all of us is to be surrounded by caring family as we are immersed in challenging life activities because these maximize our emotional growth. Challenging school environments are good. Forward-thinking curriculum is great. And diversity in classrooms is awesome. It's just that our kids need emotional readiness for these challenges. Developmental readiness can be protected and nurtured in school environments if we know what we're doing. Look who our poster boy for emotional development happens to be. Justin Bieber is seen here in a fashionable orange canvas tunic, complete with glassy eyes and a tentative smile, although he looks a little worse for wear. But just like Justin Bieber, if we find ourselves in lifestyles where everyone caters to our every need, we will become less emotionally mature. If we get to do whatever we want, whenever we want, we will become less mature even as an adult. And if we narrow our perspective on the world to think that we hold the full truth, we are all knowing, we have cornered the market, then our maturity goes out the window. This is why we cannot and should not protect kids from the challenges of everyday life, but we need to be there to support them with a dependable attachment relationship. First, the Aboriginal Circle of Courage speaks to the importance of attachment in the outcome of belonging. Individuals need a sense of dependable connectedness in a relationship, providing feelings of security and emotional sharing to be equipped for the emotional openness crucial for new relationships, like a teacher-student relationship or a new friendship at school. Adults need a fuller understanding of attachment as belonging because secure attachment equips us to develop healthy relationships with others. Second, the Circle of Courage speaks to the importance of adaptation in the outcome of mastery. Yes, individuals will become overwhelmed by the challenges of life and sink into feelings of futility when efforts reach a virtual brick wall. But the wonderful outcome of adaptation is the mastery in becoming a more flexible problem solver, because all environments have their hidden rules and real constraints. Adaptation evolves competence, resilience, self-control, and personal conviction. Adults need an understanding of adaptation as mastery because the process of adaptation is loud and messy. It evokes strong emotions when facing setbacks and suffering in life, or even when facing new responsibilities and challenges as we grow up. Third is the importance of emergence in the outcome of independence. Individuals given the freedom to explore their preferences and personal interests automatically tap into their personal skill, personal goal setting, personal focused attention, their sustained concentration, and critical judgment. Emergence experiences are enjoyable and constructive, giving one feelings of growing autonomy, responsibility, and creativity. The outcome of independence is no small matter because this is the formation of self-identity and pondering one's life course. Adults need an understanding of emergence as independence because this is the route to authentic self-esteem. Fourth is the importance of integration in the outcome of generosity. Individuals are almost universally ready for integrative functioning during the cognitive shift of ages 5 to 7, known very recently to be a developmental switch point. Italian researchers, headed by Del Giudici, report that the endocrine system triggers brain growth, with the result that children entering school are ready to see multiple perspectives in their expanding world. But also, the hormonal changes relate directly to sex differences showing up as gendered play, with generally boys preferring to be rough and tumble in comrade groups, and girls' play being more caregiving attachment style. Now, these are big generalizations, and of course, children can be atypical with gender expression and even be rejecting or explore their gender preferences. But the point is that a child's perspective becomes binary or dualistic, so they can see at least two sides of an idea. Adults need an understanding of integration as generosity, otherwise, we will wonder why our best attempts with social emotional learning fail to teach ethical reasoning or teach moral decisions or teach critical reflection and altruism. It is useful, I find, to get a sense from each student if they are showing signs of openness for relationship which hints at healthy attachment. I look for evidence this child is able to adapt to the constraints on them throughout the day, at least in little ways so far. And I want to see energy for play and learning as emergence. Plus, I'm looking for small acts of kindness or generosity to peers, adults, or little buddies, which is evidence of integrative functioning, even at the youngest ages. If I can see hints that each of these is present, this gives me the confidence these processes are alive and reasonably intact, that they can be nurtured so they will grow. If they are missing, then the relational developmental work we do is the best way to get a child back on track. So next, I have cherry-picked a relatively small number of highly applicable concepts or constructs for each of the 4 processes of emotional development. Because as I wrap up this relational developmental framework for schools, we move into interventions next, and the interventions are based on embedded core constructs identified by practitioners and researchers. The grounding theory is attachment, but if we care to study emotional development, the theory building takes us much further afield. So I can suggest a beginning point for reading about each of these emotional developmental processes in the next 4 slides. So we start with attachment as belonging. The concept of attachment has been tackled by some great thinkers. Number 1 on this list is John Bowlby, a British psychologist and psychiatrist who started writing about attachment in the 50s. He contributes the idea of a primary attachment figure so that we can understand it's a mistake to suppose that a young child diffuses attachment over many figures in such a way that this child gets along without a primary attachment. On the contrary, a primary attachment is a foundation for the child to direct attention to others the child can feel comfortable with. In fact, if the primary attachment is not strong or dependable enough, the child will be more inhibited in interacting with anyone else, even playmates. Next is Powell, Cooper, Hoffman, and Marvin. These are clinical counselors from Spokane, Washington, and they explain the secure base and safe haven aspects of the circle of security provided by attachment. This group of counselors have diagrammed this idea of a child being satiated by emotional connection with an attachment figure. And once feeling full of emotional confidence and calmness, the child ventures to explore and play until they are saturated by the challenges in this world and they feel, I need you, triggering them to return to the safe haven the parent provides to again be satiated with feelings of attachment. Okay, next is Donald Winnicott. He was a 20th century British pediatrician and psychoanalyst, and he saw thousands of child-parent dyads, and he formulated the idea of the good enough parent and the competent infant. He helps us see that parents don't have to be perfect. There is lots of room for clumsiness and mistakes in reading what our child needs. But we try to stay tuned in or attuned to the developmental level, the developmental needs. This is so because the attachment relationship is a dyad. There will be impatience and exhaustion from the mother or the child, either one at times. But a competent infant can use mental activity and capacity for delaying their needs for a short term at least when the parent is not emotionally available. Otherwise, attachment theory appears to place an imbalance of responsibility on the parent and implies that good parenting should be overprotective, which is not the truth. Winnicott also saw the idea of transitional objects from Anna Freud's work, especially objects that are multisensory, so there are more attachment memories elicited from this object when the child and parent are apart. Okay, next is Jaak Panksepp and Lucy Biven, and they have taken a look at neurology for us. They have outlined brain systems that overlay primary emotional processes like the caring system and the panic and grief system to create functional behavior from powerful needs for connection and social interaction. Panksepp and Biven outlined 7 brain systems setting an evolutionary foundation for survival, because we are wired for attachment, and at the same time, we're wired to be very sensitive to messages of rejection through the panic and grief brain systems. The panic and grief system responds vigorously to any indication of social or emotional instability, so children remain hypervigilant to tone of voice, visual expression, or gestures. This glimpse of insights from various writers hopefully hints at the deeper understandings that we get from attachment. The fruit of attachment is undeniably valuable. We get authentic connection with a child, even though we are not the primary attachment for this child. But this takes time. The child should be showing us they feel safe enough to forget themselves for a time so they can be full of wonder, curiosity, and questions within feelings of security to explore freely. We will witness energy to play and tolerate the teasing and meanness from peers that goes along with play at times. There should be a desire to learn that is apparent. We will see caring from this child, curiosity, and even moral thinking to make it fair for others and not just fair for me. We get emotional openness, emotional awareness. Emotional regulation will begin to emerge, and emotional maturation will be maximized at whatever age the attachments improve or the attachments are adequate. We can begin scaffolding self-reflection and probe for perspective with this child when we are maximizing the emotional maturation, and overall, mental health will be intact. Adaptation as mastery. Adaptation was discussed in the mid-1800s by Charles Darwin, a British biologist, when he wrote about the adaptations for survival, in particular environmental conditions, in his studies of evolutionary biology. He described the importance of diversified means to achieve the same end. So adaptation in this sense can be applied to the adaptive process in each individual who needs a workaround or a do-over to find solutions to everyday problems and the dilemmas of life. The more adaptive we can be, the more resilient we become. Jean Piaget, a Swiss psychologist who lived into the 1960s, discussed cognitive developmental stages as the result of adapting to and accommodating new learning. His research guided practices in education for several generations. His work attempted to include the child's whole self as a sensory motor being examining the concrete world and a rational intellectual being able to construct theories and experiment with ideas, although Piaget did not study emotions. Lev Vygotsky is next on this list, a Russian psychologist of the early 1900s. He explained the zone of proximal development to be the space that opens for teaching and learning to impact development, and that children are not bound by stages of development as originally suggested by Piaget. Vygotsky believed child development to be a more complex process that was uneven, morphing, and transforming the child using internal and external factors. These are social and cultural factors to impact development. He also wrote that play leads development, meaning that a child is always playing with themes that reach beyond their current daily functioning. In other words, this child is functioning as an older child in their playful moments. Vygotsky died at age 37, just as he was getting interested in emotions. But at the very least, his view of the zone of proximal development is useful to see that a child's emotionality or lack of emotional readiness for challenges at school can substantially narrow the zone of development in a school environment. Corey Keyes and Jonathan Haidt are American psychologists currently studying positive emotions and human development. They edited a book of articles on flourishing from the heavyweights in positive psychology, with one full chapter on psychological turning points, which is truly the essence of emotional adaptation. Their definition from an adult perspective is a period or point in time when a person has undergone a major transformation in views about the self. The feeling that life has reached a turning point is part of this. Significant life events and difficulties, life transitions, and internal subjective changes such as self-realizations or reinterpretations of past experiences. A turning point may be positive or negative in character, or both at the same time. A view of adaptation is very valuable. The following list is from materials written by Gordon Neufeld of Vancouver about the fruits of adaptation, which he believes includes a child who can learn from trial and error because they are willing to finally recognize that no, that won't work as an outcome to then try something else. Those who won't take no for an answer are relatively non-adaptive. A child who can transcend the learning differences, disabilities, or handicaps they live with. It's not singularly the blindness or lack of mobility that we suffer with, but the lack of adaptation to the constraints that we are experiencing in a world that was built for those who can see and those who can be independently mobile. A child who benefits from errors, mistakes, and failures instead of using tantrums and meltdowns to get everyone around them to compensate. An adaptive child is one that can benefit from correction, to learn something new, to learn what is missing and accept what doesn't work. Like Darwin says, diversified attempts. A child who can resourcefully resolve conflicts. But this depends on abandoning their own emotionality long enough to hear another point of view. Those who can accept limits and restrictions to salvage part of the good work they've done and not reject their efforts altogether. And to let go of what doesn't work, not trying the same thing that doesn't work again and again. And this child is not easily provoked because they readily have a workaround. Emergence with the outcome of independence. John Dewey, an early 20th century American educational philosopher, teacher, and psychologist, continues to impact our efforts to create progressive schools, and he might have been one of the first to write about emergence and the energy to emerge. His model for optimal functioning was the experience of being fully absorbed in a task. There is a selective investment, he says, in attention to this task, rather than being coerced or expected to take on this task. The experience is one of being entirely taken up, or in other words, completely involved with intense participation, to be swept away, engrossed in thinking and feeling one's way toward a measure of completion. Dewey explains the enjoyment and willing attention that endures over a period of time because the activity is meaningful. It taps our experience and results in new learning. Emergence characterizes lifelong careers, craftsmanship, inventions, discoveries, and hobbies of all kinds. Emergence has been a thesis of Benjamin Bloom throughout his career, although I don't know that he ever used the word emergence. Dr. Bloom is an American educational researcher and university professor who spent part of his career at the University of Chicago. He promoted the thinking that each of us is equally equipped for learning, but our potential can be hindered by some unintentional combination of factors at home, at school, or in society at large. Bloom studied talent development, and his definition contrasts greatly with the thinking at that time when they were equating talent with natural gifts or aptitudes. His studies illustrated the essential role of effort in developing one's talent. Bloom's work directly impacted the Head Start movement in the US for preschoolers, but he also influenced authors addressing multiple intelligences and emotional intelligence. Albert Bandura, born in Mundare, Alberta, Canada, he would be 92 now. He became a professor at Stanford. He paved the way for social thinking, but he explored self-efficacy in detail. So at this point, we understand better the connection between emotions and our ability to exert influences over our life and environment. Bandura states that an inability to exert change in one's life breeds apprehension, apathy, and despair. And furthermore, one's belief in their own agency or efficacy influences the course of action people choose to pursue. It affects how much effort they will give, how long they will persevere in the face of obstacles or failures, and whether there will be increased resilience as a result. Emergence relies on thought patterns that are self-aiding and self-motivating as positive self-efficacy, and not self-hindering thought patterns which stress and depress the efforts of a learner. And last on this list, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, also on the faculty at the University of Chicago. He presents a description of flow. Csikszentmihalyi is in his 80s now, and his life's work marked the move into positive psychology. His concept of flow recognized the importance of emotion and cognition working together to provide a sense of discovery, an awareness of an altered reality when we are deeply engrossed in activity. Also, selfless focus on performance with a tight feedback loop of goal setting, then evaluation, then creative problem solving, then new goal setting, and more evaluation. So that's the tight feedback loop he describes. Dr. Csikszentmihalyi tells us self-esteem is born from powerful flow experiences that challenge our skills, attention, challenges our problem solving, our creativity, and openness to learning. Flow is abundant during emergence experiences. There is an intention by the individual to be vitally involved as the agent of their own growing capacities. And in fact, the individual is the most significant player, leading their own creative process to tackle problems, set goals, while moving their project forward. The fruit of emergence, again from the work of Vancouver clinical psychologist Gordon Neufeld, is what we value in students. Thinking for oneself means we get independent thinkers and self-initiating workers. Students are eager to try new things because they have positive thoughts of their agency and self-efficacy, beliefs that they can be successful. We get self-directed learners and children who can evaluate themselves. Emergent learners will be not simply seeking mindless entertainment, but becoming creative in their times of solitude. And this is actually where culture is born, in those free moments when our basic needs are met. We become creative with materials and ideas and express ourselves artfully. Emergent individuals are not content to always follow others. They are eager to discover, experience, and create using their own skills and following their own interests, and they seek to be their own person. Also, part of the emergent experience is witnessing our actions and their outcomes as we engage in worthwhile activities. So it's empowering to feel our responsibility. We can give ourselves credit, feel competent, and then we gain self-esteem. I want to point out that emergence should not be more highly valued than any of the other processes. There needs to be a balance so our attachment and adaptation can keep our emergence in context. We feel our belongingness to other people as we adapt to the need for safety. And we don't simply become mad scientists or unethical politicians making this world more dangerous. And the last emotional developmental process to discuss is integration. Integration with the outcome of generosity essentially results from the overwhelming feeling of dissonance that keeps us awake at night, worrying and pondering. Maybe you felt this dissonance when you read the ad below for cocaine toothache drops. Our horror is instant, and the dissonance felt makes us imagine what we might say to educate our forefather or foremothers at the time of this ad. Dissonance activates integration. Leon Festinger was an American social psychologist. He died in 1989, but is credited with vigorously renouncing behaviorist accounts of human behavior because there is little understanding of the whole person among behaviorists, or the social person in real life situations. He contributed this idea that communication is not just expressive, it is instrumental in bridging the gap between what you and I know, or what you and I believe, and what you and I feel. Festinger recognized that feelings of dissonance move us to reduce the discrepancy we feel when our views and opinions are too divergent from others. We seek alignment, sameness, and thus empathic understanding within our social group. This is the process of emotional integration, to speak our mind and yet listen to others to make sense of what I believe, and how does that compare with what you believe, and eventually comparison with larger societal views that might be political, economic, or humanitarian. Next on this list is Abraham Maslow. And he, among others, injected the term self-actualization to highlight our human tendency to be motivated by needs, to strive for constant betterment, and self-transcendence, to give ourselves to other higher outside goals in altruism or spirituality. Self-actualization and self-transcendence are journeys of a lifetime to become a significant social member who is open to the dilemmas and changing views of the world, while at the same time holding true to the core personal values of the developing self. Maslow's model of the hierarchy of needs illustrates how self-actualization cannot be addressed when there are sensory needs or safety needs with this child. Erik Erikson was born in Germany, but immigrated to the US as World War II ramped up. He was a developmental psychologist, and his work on personal identity formation produced a detailed mapping of the dissonance inherent in development, and he called them psychosocial stages. Erikson explains that each individual must struggle with dissonance in a given life stage to develop wisdom as emotional maturity. For example, infants struggle with basic trust versus basic mistrust, which needs to be resolved by seeing and valuing both dimensions. So the world can be seen as kind and predictable, yet also worthy of attention for safety. So this would be the creation of a virtue of hope. Toddlers struggle with autonomy versus shame and doubt, which must be resolved to have self-control and self-esteem in the virtue of will. Preschoolers struggle with the initiative versus guilt to develop the virtue of purpose. School-age children struggle with industry versus inferiority to develop competence. And adolescents struggle with identity versus role confusion, resulting in fidelity, a commitment, acceptance of self and others. But when this is not resolved, adolescents will have an identity crisis displayed by experimenting with lifestyles. Erikson's work is deep and wide, covering 9 age-specific stages, and it would be time well spent to take a look at his work. Corey Keyes and Jonathan Haidt, who edited the book on flourishing I mentioned earlier, have gleaned great insight about integration in discussions on self-transcendent strivings. Because flourishing, it turns out, is not simply attaining the life goal of being happy. Happiness is most often the byproduct of participating in worthwhile projects and activities that do not have happiness as their primary focus, but instead the focus is goal setting to help others and work with others. Our strivings are based on feelings of dissonance, that something is not quite right, to right the wrongs and create harmony in ways. And then last on this list is John Kabat-Zinn, the founding director of the Stress Reduction Clinic and Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society at the University of Massachusetts Medical School. His teachings and writing are instrumental in the growing movement of mindfulness infiltrating every institution in North America. He writes about our general inability to teach values, that they're not really teachable, because he recognizes we can only advocate for this within our families and classrooms. Ultimately, it is through embodying healthy values ourselves that our children come to have a direct experience of them and absorb them into their view of themselves and the world. Mindfulness becomes transcendent striving as it relates to becoming better grounded in the wonder of everyday living, to tap hidden reserves of enthusiasm, vitality, spirit, and openness. So these are the diverse ways of viewing integration, with the common theme of feelings of dissonance to awaken emotions, confronting the lack of harmony we encounter in life. The undeniably valuable fruits of integration are students who can work toward a goal, and furthermore to challenge themselves with personal goals. Integrative functioning improves our patience with frustrations, because we can balance our needs with the needs of others, and we are capable of mixed feelings as we face the many perspectives on a dilemma we are trying hard to understand and set right. Virtuous characteristics result, as Erickson outlined, the virtues of hope, will, purpose, competence, and fidelity among our young people. We become more sensitive to moral issues and the viewpoint of others with our growing use of perspective within a context. This also facilitates working well with others, being considerate, and applying fairness more often and more spontaneously. Emotional development is the underlying essential for growing up to be well attached, adaptive, emergent, and achieve integration. So let's take a look at the framework I am suggesting for schools. The attachment metaphor suggested by Gordon Neufeld and his institute will help us pull the relational developmental framework together as we work on the emotions, feelings, and attitudes of this student, because we understand the importance of working on the roots and not the fruits. We see the importance of maintaining the healthy functioning of the roots of attachment by continuing to strive for feelings of sameness, belonging, loyalty, and significance in this student, which does not require any special materials or resources beyond the way we talk to children and how we communicate with tone of voice, facial expression, and gestures consistently and dependably every day. I believe the first decision point for paying attention to this child is the presence of alarm, frustration, or separation needs that are beyond what is normal. The first step is a good basic plan to support children with these emotional needs in working with the roots of attachment. A strong tree trunk relies on practices which address 4 areas of sensitivities which appear to be ongoing for this child. There are sensory sensitivities, safety sensitivities, separation sensitivities, or esteem sensitivities, just like in Maslow's hierarchy of needs. If we can't track these sensitivities, we will have great difficulty seeing the emotional triggers resulting in instinctive reactions from this child in multiple contexts of their life. The instincts of fight, flight, freeze, appease, approach, and avoid can be much better understood if we can see the relational and developmental dynamics at play. These dynamics are better illustrated by using the attachment labels of counter will instead of fight, home base instead of flight, shyness instead of freeze, alpha complex instead of appease, dependence instead of approach, and detach instead of avoid. It would serve children and youth much better if the practitioners working with children every day could see and discuss the sensory, safety, separation, and esteem dynamics within each instinct to then know what to do. We must do fruitful work to get kids unstuck from strong behaviors which damage relationships and stall development. I believe there are 3 practitioner practices necessary to discuss further. These are relational enhancement, developmental attunement, and emotional coherence. These 3 practices define the daily patterns to bridge the relationship stressors found within the environments of this child, and also support their development by recognizing their personal vulnerabilities. Healthy roots of attachment and a sturdy trunk of relational developmental practices in turn support the limbs of emotional development by giving room for adaptation, emergence, and integration. The fruit of maturation is still well out of reach unless children and youth have our support to persevere with feelings of futility toward adaptation, feelings of fulfillment toward emergence, and the feelings of dissonance toward integration. Long before we have the outcome of a mature person, there is much work to do on the self. Each of us needs to work on knowing who we are, what we think, and what we can do before the fruits of mastery, independence, and generosity are apparent. The cultivation of self is one of the evolutionary goals of attachment, to get us ready to be a social being. Self-identity work is done through emotions, feelings, and attitudes. I will repeat that as a practitioner, we think relationally and developmentally. We already do. Otherwise, we couldn't tolerate working with children and teens. So the shift of thinking I am requesting is not a seismic shift, but it is a philosophical shift. Insight shifts philosophy. Then my question becomes, have any of the ideas in these 4 questions provided insight for you? We have discussed how children and youth actually do not function very well outside of relationships. They are not ready to be fully independent. So there will be substantial alarm and frustration resulting from too much separation. We have heard examples of strong or stuck instinctive behaviors, which result from attachment needs not being met. If we disregard the importance of attachment, then we cannot see what fuels much of human behavior. This is true because behavior is the tip of the iceberg and emotion is largely underwater. Unmet emotional needs are therefore largely hidden. We have to go looking for what is missing because the child or youth will not know. Without a dependable primary attachment, it's easy to think this is a mean and hostile world rather than to face that my closest relationship doesn't care for me. This is a very harsh reality indeed to face up to. Does it feel counterintuitive to think that emotional maturation is more about the right feelings than the right experiences? Well, think about this. When high school students organize a car wash to raise money for a new well with clean water in an African community, it is the students who can sink most deeply into their feelings of alarm and empathy about Africans having to drink dirty water, give dirty water to infants, get dysentery, or actually being a parent as a very young teen in a place where there is not clean water. Those high school students actually feeling the alarm and frustration are those who gain a measure of maturity. TV can be a very good medium for eliciting emotions. So when we see a baby being fed contaminated water from their baby bottle, we can also have the right feelings. We don't have to actually experience dysentery ourselves to learn from someone else's experience. Experience is a great teacher, but thank goodness our emotional growth can save us from having to learn all lessons the hard way. Our emotions help us. It is vital that we know we are working with emotions, feelings, and attitudes to support the emotional development of our children. The relational developmental work we do comes from an authentic and emotionally open, caregiving, and receiving relationship with this child or youth. So we need their vulnerability and unguarded cooperation. But what happens when we do not have a child who can receive our caring? They won't cooperate with us. In fact, they are working against us with some strong behaviors they seem stuck in. Then we have to use interventions which impact the environment around this child. We cannot improve the interaction between adult and child if the child is not willing to work with us. And we can certainly get caught up in reacting to behavior that is alarming to us or insulting to us and feels disrespectful. Schools are often trapped by using behavior strategies which are interactive or reactive in nature. I suggest we back it up to generate ideas to predict the problems children and youth will hand us. Then we can be preventive and proactive to enhance relationships, tune right into their developmental vulnerabilities, and organize or regulate emotions. We need to use interventions at multiple levels. So consider this full array of intervention levels: prediction, prevention, proaction, interaction, reaction, and reflection. If we aren't able to get this child working better with us or functioning better in social groups, Then let's back it up to consider what proaction is necessary as a new pattern for this child. Or back it up to prevention of the dangerous situations and add more supervision in the most problematic situations we experience with this child. Or even back it up more to prediction by gathering much more detail about the whole child so we can more easily predict the problems coming our way. But if we are stuck in interaction and reaction, we cannot do the relational enhancement work we need for a more emotionally mature child to unfold. In my experience, we will become very frustrated when we are stuck at the interaction and reaction levels with a child or youth. We cannot do relational enhancement work in these levels because we are giving this child the message again and again. You are not cooperative enough. You are not correct enough. You are not completing enough work. You are not likable enough. And we are working against our best efforts with relational enhancement. So the next presentation I will offer to you is about interventions, and that totally activates this relational developmental framework.